Next, we'll hear from Marcella Woodson. Marcella is a community development consultant, a regional civic leader in Southern Illinois, and the founder of Marcella Woodson Consulting. With more than a decade of experience in community advocacy, she specializes in healing-centered approaches to trauma, youth development, and workforce equity. Marcella has led transformative projects involving cultural preservation, economic justice, and holistic health. The name of her presentation is Cairo at the Confluence, Merging Waters of the Ohio and Mississippi Rivers. Please welcome Marcella Woodson.
I want to thank you all for coming out to the conference today. It's a pleasure and honor for me to actually be able to present my presentation. Being that I am deeply rooted in Cairo, my maternal and paternal family comes from Cairo, and I have great vision and hope for what's yet to come. So I'm glad you all were able to make it out today. We're going to talk a little bit about merging waters of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers.
You want to just say next and I'll hit it for you?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, next. All right, so an overview of today's presentation is here's a geographical map of Cairo. We're surrounded, you see, by Kentucky. We have the Ohio, Mississippi rivers. Right here, we are going to talk about the geographical significance, some historical content, also cultural impact and environmental perspective, and then talk a little bit about community engagement and the future outlook of Cairo and what that looks like for us. So starting with the geographical significance, right here we have a historical map of Cairo, and this is a more up-to-date, more recent map. And again, you can see Cairo runs right through confluence of Missouri and Kentucky, and it's positioned of two major rivers. It made it a pivotal transportation and trade hub in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Okay, next. All right, a little bit of historical context right here. Fort Defiance, this is the original building, and it's still a building down there at Fort Defiance where you go in. I don't know if this is the same location or not, and that had been a renovation. But during the Civil War, Cairo served as a Union supply base under General Ulysses S. Grant. Post-war, it experienced economic growth followed by a decline due to industrial changes. And as far as those industrial changes, a lot of that had to do with the activity that was taking place on the waterways between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers as the century turned. A little bit of history. Cairo says founded in 1837 at the confluence of Ohio and Mississippi rivers. Again, was a thriving river port and industrial town in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was also featured in Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. If you all have read that book, you know Cairo is deeply rooted in that book. It has some really good historical value to it. And if you ever have a chance to visit the Customs House here in Cairo, there's some pretty interesting material and some pretty interesting structures there in regards to Mark Twain. This is just a historical timeline of Cairo. We're going to look at the 1800s, which would have been the steamboat boom. And then moving into the 1900s, we were around the Civil War stronghold. Civil rights came in, in the late 50s and 60s. And then this goes all the way up to the 2010s, when the population in Cairo started to decline. Back to the one that okay. So in the 1800s, again, we have seen how Cairo was booming. We have seen how the import and export was and how there was economic value brought to the community of Cairo. And so as we went through the different generations, we're here in the 2010s now, moving forward to the 20s, we're still experiencing some of these same disparities that go all the way back to the 1800s and early 1900s. So these are some actual black and white photos that were taken here in Cairo during the civil rights movement. Right here, this is just some general information when Cairo was founded. The city prospers as a key river trade center, and then mid-19th century, the site mentioned again in Mark Twain, and then in the 20th century, Cairo was the center of civil rights. Okay, getting into the cultural impact. Center of African American Life and Civil Rights protests took place here in Cairo. A lot of my elders, I know, including my parents, were a part of, and maybe some of you here in the room were a part of some of the civil rights marches and the different types of civil rights activism that was taking place here in Cairo. So in the 1960s, there was lots of protests. The NAACP led and organized, and they had grassroots power. Modern continuation with Black Lives Matter March, continuing again in 2020, that was the first year that Juneteenth was actually celebrated as a national holiday. And that was the first year that city leaders and different individuals here in Cairo came together and formed a Black Lives Matter March, as well as started their first annual Juneteenth celebration. So this is Senator John Lewis, rest his soul. He had come to Cairo in 1962, and this photo here is very powerful. You all may have also seen other photos of him where he's actually kneeling and along with two others. That photo became very famous, and it was taken right here in Cairo. But in the summer of 1962, John Lewis, then a field secretary for Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCCJ, arrived in Cairo, Illinois to support local civil rights efforts. He participated in peaceful demonstrations, including a prayer vigil at a segregated swimming pool, advocating for desegregation of public facilities and equal rights for all residents. Lewis committed to nonviolent protest and grassroots activism in Cairo, exemplified his lifelong dedication to civil rights and social justice. So this right here is actually a picture of myself and some other community leaders. This was the first Black Lives Matter march, again, that took place on Juneteenth, 2020. And we are down undergoing the historical downtown Cairo Arch, located on 8th Street. Okay. So within that, as well as that picture, that was a part of us filming a documentary. And Cairo has several documentaries. I have some resources for you if you're interested that I can share, where you can go to different documentaries or YouTube on things that myself and other local residents of Cairo have actually documented. So this was a part of the Cairo, Illinois project. It was directed by Little Egypt Productions team. We actually come together with some Northwestern University film artists, and they come down back and forth and would film different events and just Cairo in general, talking to the citizens, just gathering vital information. So the Cairo project offered a collectively authored portrait of Cairo, a former industrial and agricultural empire at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. It was a nexus for civil rights in the 1960s, and through intimate depictions created collaboratively, the film celebrates Cairo's vitality and rich history while advancing efforts for environmental, artistic, and economic well-being in defiance of systemic injustices. Now, getting into the environmental perspective, when we take a look at Fort Defiance, also known as the Point, right? These are some things that we like to keep in mind as far as how we can preserve, how we can grow, and how we can implement new technology and new resources available. So we would be looking at wetlands, levees in the Mississippi floodplain. Flooding actually still remains a serious threat to Cairo. Just a couple of weeks ago, I think the entryway to Cairo was closed, and they have it where you have to go around, and come in the other way. So these are things that have structurally, environmentally, and generationally affected Cairo. Environmental justice needed alongside of economic reform. So when we talk about environmental justice and economic reform, that means that we must prioritize environmental justice alongside revitalization in Cairo. We also want to protect vulnerable waterways at the Ohio and Mississippi confluence. implement levee reinforcement, wetland restorations, and climate resilience planning. These are all things that community members and leadership has to be involved in and have the resources and knowledge to make these corrections. Invest in green jobs and sustainable infrastructure, and balance environmental protection with economic growth opportunities for residents. Now, looking at the geographical perspective, this is a map of Cairo and Fort Defiance, the point right here. And again, I kind of talked about how flooding is still an issue and, the levees and things like that. We're going to watch just a quick 1-minute video, I think, and it will give you a overlook of what it looks like at Fort Defiance and what it looks like as you go across the bridges when we have these flooding issues. We're going to go back to that video afterwards. I don't want to hold up time. But yes, that video actually shows a drone view of what it looks like when we're flooded here. Next. All right, the economy of Cairo. Cairo was a major river port, central trade to an industry in the late 19th and to early 20th centuries. With population and employment decline, the economy has suffered for many reasons. So again, we're looking at the inception. Here on this chart, we can see the ups and downs, but when we really hit like the 1920s is when the decline started going down all the way into the 2020s. A part of that housing decline in our modern day is the housing crises that have happened here in Cairo. The first housing crisis being 2017, when it was announced that the residents of 2 housing complexes here in Cairo, Elmwood and McBride, would have to be moved out of their homes due to demolition. So public housing demolition led to mass displacement. HUD and local officials failed to deliver sustainable relocation, and highlighted in the national media and civil rights discourse was all of this housing crisis. And some of you all may have experienced this, or you may have followed it back in 2019 when it was demolition. At that time, we had Ben Carson, who came to Cairo. He was here and he actually visited the school systems. He talked to several community leaders and people of leadership here. And when he left, I don't think that our community was pleased with the results that we got. So that allowed us to be able to move forward and do something as community members to advocate for what Cairo was going through as far as the housing crisis. Okay. So if you take a look here, this is McBride on one side, and this is Elmwood on the other side. So the Cairo, Illinois housing crisis of 2017 affected roughly 200 families. This included families living in McBride and Elmwood, and they were slated for demolition and due to disrepair. Some of the apartments, they say, were unlivable conditions and things like that, hazards, so that's what led to the demolition. Initially, 185 families were being evicted from the 2 complexes, and that estimated about 400 people, including children. And if you look at that, including that many children, that takes away from the school district. So not only did the community lose residents, the school systems also lost students. Some households may have had 4, 5, 6 children in the school system that were forced to move out. This is the demolition of McBride and Elmwood once it got started. Once demolition started, again, residents were immediately forced to move. Some were elders, and some were disabled. A lot of them had nowhere to go and had to move hours, if not states away from Cairo. Just recently, residents of Cairo housing have also experienced another demolition housing crisis, which left families again displaced or having to be able to find other places outside of Cairo. So January 4th, 2025 was the end of an era for Cairo, Illinois, as this historical high-rise building, which is the Connell F. Smith Senior Building, that sat on the riverfront in Cairo, a public housing complex. It was built in 1968 and it was demolished. Personal story for me, my great-grandmother lived there, my family nanny lived there. I had different individual elders that I know had lived in that building since it actually opened. And these people were having to move away from their natural habitat and environment at 80, 90 years old, and some of them actually didn't make it. So there is Housing Hope. This is a positive side of it all. The whole thing in advocating for fair housing and being able to have just housing here in Cairo boils down to, even though those families had to leave in 2019 and just recently, there are ways that we can actually bring individual residents back to Cairo and build the population. So on the positive side, there was a 3D printing project where Cairo actually now has the first 3D printed homes that have been created in the state of Illinois. So this initiative actually aims to address the critical housing shortage in the city, particularly affecting the families displaced after the public housing closures. The project is a collaborative effort with organizations like Eminence Resources and Prestige Project Management. They donated the duplex and are managing the project. This marks the first 3D printed home in Illinois and the first residential construction project in Cairo in over 30 years. So even though we've went through the traumas of residents being and citizens being displaced, we have the hope and light of being able to utilize these types of resources in our community to bring individuals back. Here's some pictures of the groundbreaking ceremony right here. This is what it looked like once they actually started printing the foundation. These are kind of blurry. And then visiting the first 3D printed home here, we have our state treasurer, the treasurer, we have our senators, the mayor, and a couple of other individuals I would think would be from Eminence and Prestige. Now, taking a look in community engagement and the future outlook of Cairo, what does it take for us to revitalize and to build a community? To bring individuals back to become effective citizens in the community of Cairo. So, ways that you can actually contribute to this is by establishing a local green infrastructure plan. That means the wetlands restoration, like we talked about at Fort Defiance, tree planting and flood mitigation, making sure that the city pumps are all operating and things like that. Pursuing environmental justice grants and federal funding. Working with the EPA or the USDA to develop additional developmental funds and grants for the community. Also, oh, there's more, it's okay. Develop community-owned renewable energy projects. Ways that you can do that is by launching small-scale solar or wind cooperatives and creating jobs to lower energy costs. Now, we know that that's another trauma that Cairo has, is dealing with the cost of the electric bills. It's been in the news, it's been a conversation, it's been something that's been ongoing. So when I started advocating for Cairo to actually be able to have solar and to be able to look at doing different things like maybe windmills and doing all of these analysis to see how we could come up with different ways to lower the cost of the utilities here in Cairo. It's still in the works. I know there's contracts at play, but sometimes we have to just not give up and you see what happens. So creating an urban agriculture and food sovereignty initiative. Rise Community Market opened it'll be 2 years in June. Unfortunately, the grocery store had to close due to lack of funding and resources, but that was a project that took about 2 years to actually get funding, to get everything set up. So Cairo was a food desert for 7 years. And they did have Rise Community Market, and the deli's still open there, it's still operating business, but there's also still funding needed to be able to open the store. We have individuals that travel to Missouri or travel to Kentucky just to buy groceries. And then you're buying groceries, you also have to pay for gas. So it takes away when we need to be able to provide these general necessities here in our community. So outside of the community co-op, there's been behind the school here, Cairo Community Garden was a garden that myself and local organization members actually started so individuals could have access to fresh fruit and vegetables, and also to teach the students here at the schools about agriculture and gardening. So forming a regional watershed protection alliance, those are things, again, that would go along with the wetlands, and if that's something that you're interested in, revitalization at Fort Defiance. I'm not going to go through all of these. Launching green workforce development programs, incentives for eco-friendly small business development. There's micro grants and tax incentives for businesses that actually support the sustainability of low and higher local. Promoting ecotourism and riverfront revitalization. Strengthening partnerships with the universities and research centers. Talking a little bit about the wetlands and restoration and preservation of Fort Defiance. I had the opportunity about 3 years ago to work with Southern Illinois University and Memphis University on a watershed project. And we had a couple of listening sessions on it. We worked with them closely, and I think they did make some way with what it is they were trying to implement with that program. Another organization that I'm a part of is the National Wildlife Federation Ohio River Coalition. And we actually meet very frequently and discuss some of the disparities in regards to the Ohio River, or some of the things that we're getting from local residents that actually live along the Ohio River. All right, so exploring Cairo. This is the famous Cairo Viaduct. I'll never forget this. As a kid, me and my siblings would always ride in the back of my dad's pickup truck. And whenever we went under the viaduct, we would either hold our breath and see who could do it the longest, or we would, we would just scream all the way through. And that's a childhood memory. I think so many children in Cairo probably did that growing up. So this is Fort Defiance. This is just a couple of slides next of some different historical points that you may want to visit here in Cairo, and also help support the preservation of them as well. Magnolia Manor. The River Lore Mansion. They've done some restoration work on the River Lore Mansion over the past couple of years. It's coming along. The Customs House Museum. Cairo Public Library. And what is the call to action? So for me, it's to encourage and support Cairo's redevelopment efforts and opportunities for collaboration and investment with those who may not be from Cairo, but actually have a passion, and they see the vision of what it is that we're doing to rebuild our community. Okay. So that is my presentation. I thank you all for being here today once again, and I hope that was informative for you. We're gonna see if you have time, if you can get the drone video on. Thank you.
I'm so glad that we got a chance to see that,
Thank you. I'm
those
glad that-
beautiful images of this beautiful region. And I'd like to ask if you'd be willing to answer some questions. Does anyone have any questions, curiosities, ideas?
What's going on with RISE right now?
RISE is actually in need of funding. As of right now, I know that the deli has been open for lunch. Other than that, the grocery store has not been able to sustain funding to provide stock. So the thing is reaching out, writing the grants, reaching out like we did before to be able to have those individuals that see the vision of Cairo not being a food desert again. We can't go another 7 years, 8 years here without having a grocery store. So whatever that means to you all that's sitting here in the room today, if you have connections, if you know anybody, if you know of organizations that would be willing to contribute to the reopening and reestablishment of Rice Community Market, that would be amazing. Okay.
And I can add to what you said, Marcella, if that's okay. There's a group, I'm a member of RISE as well, my wife and some of the other members in the room. I've taken an active approach personally, and my wife and I and other groups. For example, our African American Heritage had a meeting there last week, and we bought from the deli. They have a conference room. I know the other day, the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority had a meeting there. They ate there. They did some brainstorming, and it's going to take the community to get more involved and support the market. So that's some of the things we're doing. So I just want to add to that. And then a comment. Marcella, thank you for that lovely historical background for my presentation that I'm going to do in a few minutes. So that I don't have to give that background. So I appreciate you doing that.
Another question in the back. A couple more questions.
So many questions.
Yes.
Who do we contact about the Customs House Museum, since they're not, she's not there anymore, passed away?
For a tour?
Yes, ma'am. Let's hope-
Mr. Patton?
Because people haven't been there should go there. It's very interesting.
Yeah, the librarian is Toya Wilson. She should be here later. I could probably speak a little bit on that in my presentation as well. Right now it's closed due to the roof, and they're trying to repair the roof.
That's the Customs House.
Yes.
The Customs House will be open for view on May the 3rd,
That's true.
and there will be people there to show that. We have experienced some roof damage. It's all slate roof, and we're trying to get money to repair the roof to save the building. If we don't get any money through grants, it will, obviously the building will start going down because the roof is leaking and some of the ceilings are falling in the offices downstairs. We've cleaned it up enough that we'll be able to show it on the 3rd. It's in serious state right now.
Bill Earl is a member of the Cairo Public Library. They oversee the Custom House. My lovely wife here, Carla, she's on the library board at the Custom House as well.
Another question?
I really enjoyed your presentation, and I was
Thank
thinking
you.
this could open up some possibilities for service learning. Is there anything like that going on either through the public schools or universities, community colleges?
I really couldn't answer that question right now personally. I know efforts for that is always in play. So I'll be more than glad to connect and have a discussion.
Yeah.
SIU University journalism students have been coming to Cairo. In the past, their social work department. Years ago, I know that fellow there, Dr. Swenson, he brought a team of student architects, so it's ongoing.
Good.
Yeah.
This was so fascinating, thank you. And then just the portfolio of opportunities is just really energizing. I'm wondering if you know of other places or other towns that like you're just personally looking to where you're getting ideas or you like how they're doing it or they're making some progress in some of these roads?
Yes, there's several small towns like Cairo out here. It really is. And you can Google and you can look at the statistics, but this is Cairo, right? Looking at those statistics, a lot of times it's not entertained inward. So we have to build our communities to be able to have resources and actually to be able to want to know what's going on and how we can, revitalize and redo things in the community. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, sir.
There are 2 port authorities working in the Cairo area. Are you able to work with either one of those port authorities or the politics related to that to increase your ability to kind of solve these problems?
Absolutely. It's as far as reaching out, connecting, and having a conversation. And a lot of times it goes undone because people have a fear to do that. When we learn that our voice is our power and we let it be known, when we're in these rooms to have these type conversations, that's when we can make a change.